All right, I got 7 o'clock, so we will call the meeting to order. And we'll just go right into the agenda. The first item is action on the minutes from our last meeting. You minute readers. You're the closest person to my left.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes of August 21st.
I second that motion.
Discussions or suggested revisions? You're going to abstain? All right. All those in favor? Aye. One abstention? No nays. All right, the minutes are approved. So you guys are the next item on the agenda. Just a little bit of background. I apologize if you know this. You can stop me if you've heard it. So this is the Granby Town Center Advisory Committee. Our role is to advise both the Board of Selectmen and our Planning and Zoning Commission on the development of our town center. So we typically meet once a month. This is actually our normal meeting date, so we're very grateful that you guys could work this in. I don't know that we had reserved any specific time for you, but we want you to make whatever presentation. We've all been through your book, obviously, and then we'll save time for questions and answers. Just so you know who everybody is in the room, I'll start. I'm Mark Fiorentino, I'm the first selectman.
Abby Kenyon, Director of Community Development.
Martin Schwager, Chair of the Development Commission.
I'm Kathy Kane, I'm the recording secretary.
I'm Meg Bailey. My background is in design for health and wellness, and I'm on planning and zoning.
Eric Myers, I'm the Vice Chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
I am the public. Peggy LaRoe.
Listen, Jen, we probably have one more seat up here. If you want to come up and feel like you.
No, you're lovely. No, I'm going to just stay for a minute.
All right,
Thank you.
that's Jen Bell. She's the editor of our local newspaper. So, and also if you guys haven't figured it out, we're Zoom, although I don't see any citizens on Zoom, and we're being recorded because this is regularly broadcast, so our citizens can kind of keep track of what we're doing here. So having said all that, take it away.
All right, so we'll just introduce ourselves as well. I'm Dylan Sussman from Dodson and Flinker. I'll be the project manager if you choose to hire us.
I'm Nate Burgess from Dodson and Flinker, and I'm a landscape architect.
I'm Jay Bertoli from the Beta Group in Hartford, Connecticut. My role will be a technical advisor on this project.
And we have two members of our team on Zoom, so Jeff, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah. Good evening, John Tutis from the Beta Group. I'll be the lead transportation planner.
Brian Beatty, FXM Associates Economist.
All right, so if we could start up the presentation. All right, is it possible to switch it so we just see the slides?
Yeah.
and not the notes? I think if you go to display settings. There we go. All right.
Oh, are you getting it now?
So, here we go. Whoops.
Should call me.
Just go over and fix that, Mark.
Abby was saying she promised these guys we would not have issues with
I had a meeting last week where this happened. It never had happened before. We were in a meeting room in the town, we met with many towns before, and then suddenly this presenter notes thing popped up.
It's an update.
Yeah, it's probably a PowerPoint update. It's not a big deal. You guys may see some embarrassing notes or may not, but I'm gonna just get started. If I can use this device. No, I can't use this device. to start.
Yeah, she'll have, you have to keep her to change it. That much I know for sure.
If you can't figure it out, it's not a big deal.
No, it's not your thing, it's our thing. Mark's not getting what
Ah.
I was really boring meeting last week.
You know why the family's here today?
Okay, go ahead.
The auditors were here.
All right.
They're all lined up, going through the town.
So I wanted to start by telling you a little bit about our team. So I think that one of the strengths of our team are that the principals of the members of the team all have a whole lot of experience. So unfortunately, two of them can't be here with us tonight. Those are Peter Flinker, who's the principal of Dodson and Flinker, who's a planner and landscape architect who's been doing this for 40 plus years, specializing in visualization, villages, working in small towns. And Glenn Chandler, who is a planner who's been working in Connecticut for 40 years, has worked in many neighboring communities to yours. Peter is taking a vacation. It's the first time I've seen him take a full week off in the 6 years I've been working with him, so I'm sorry that happened on the night we're supposed to be here. And Glenn Chandler has a meeting with the Planning and Zoning Commission. So there's a lot of experience. Our process is based on an understanding of how places are actually built. As a combined planning and landscape architecture firm, we build things and we implement them, and we see how plans relate to reality. And likewise, Beta is a firm it's a multidisciplinary firm. They do engineering, they do construction, build projects. So another strength of our firm is community engagement. We value a lot what people have to say, and we put a lot of effort into trying to create opportunities for people to participate meaningfully in the process. As I said before, we work in a lot of small towns, suburban communities, rural communities. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the planning book, Rural by Design. It's one of the seminal works in planning about planning for small places, and Harry Dodson, who started the firm, was one of the co-authors of that book. We've also produced a book for Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management on village planning, which has a lot of overlaps with this project. So, as I said before, we're a multidisciplinary team. Dodson and Flinker will be the lead, and we've chosen a couple firms to work with to make sure that we have the right expertise for what we think will be key questions in the project. So Beta working on transportation and infrastructure, and FXM working on economic questions. So there's Peter up in the upper left. He's actually a lot older than that now, not a lot, but 5, 10 years. You can see I'm a bit older as well. You never aged in your headshot. So our role is to be the project lead, to work on questions around land use, design, placemaking, visioning, and master planning, to do modeling and mapping and graphics, to work on the implementation plan and the report. There's the two of us you see here tonight, Peter Flinker, and then we have 2 other associates who we expect to work on the project, who will basically support all of our work. Those are Shane and Eli. And we have other people in the firm who we may fall in as needed, but not in a significant way likely. So we've done a lot of similar work. The list on the left is kind of a partial list of projects that are related to this one in the past 10 years. We've done a fair amount of work in Connecticut, projects in Farmington, Darien, Norfolk, and Windsor. Those are both actually within the last 5 years. We just didn't include them on our list. And so, I think we have a lot of relevant experience for you. And we've honed a process for working on town center master plans, and worked out the bugs on it, so it works pretty efficiently. Glenn Chalder, like I said, he couldn't be here tonight. His role would be facilitation and also really to focus on the planning and implementation strategies. So we want to make sure that there's somebody who has a ton of experience working in Connecticut to supplement ours, who's going to really be focused on implementation. And part of that's because he's worked both as a consultant and as a town planner, so he understands it from both sides. The map there shows the communities that Glenn has worked in, and I think he's really hoping to get, a little red mark in Granby up there to fill in the map in that area. So, Beta?
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. Yeah, Jeff next to us, transportation plan, I'll be the lead for the Beta work for transportation utilities. Jay Bertoli will assist in, and I just want to mention Jay lives right next door, so he knows the area well. Next slide. Yeah, so Beta were formed a little over 40 years ago. We're employee owned. We have 170 employees. Full service engineering, planning, design firm. The local office is in Hartford, where this work would be done out of. And we do mostly work for municipalities such as yours. So the vast amount of our work is done in southern New England for cities and towns and agencies. Next slide. And just a little bit on our local experience. We know Granby well. We have 2 current contracts with your Department of Public Works, which are ongoing. One is asset management services contract, and the other is for pavement management. That's just a graphic showing pavement rating, on the slide. And also nearby Granby, we're also doing a sewer evaluation study. Next slide. We do a lot of work that's similar to this project in Connecticut, and Hartford is one of our largest clients in Connecticut. Do ADA sidewalk compliance work, did a roundabout project for them. I worked on a town-wide transportation safety study for the town of Simsbury, and then the Bushnell Park complete streetscape project, which was recently done for the city of Hartford. Next slide. And just some more Hartford projects, the Stone Hill traffic calming study, and Jay knows this Farmington Avenue corridor study, which is a very significant project for the city of Hartford. Next. Yeah, and so I just want to mention, we do a lot of work with Connecticut DOT. Also, we do have an on-call traffic and safety contract with them. It's actually our 3rd term. We're working on several projects right now. Recently, we did a bicycle and pedestrian plan for West Haven, Connecticut, through the Strong. And then Safe Streets for All is a new federal initiative, and we're working on projects for that. Mostly in Connecticut and Massachusetts, and for Connecticut and Northeast Connecticut, COG will be starting that. So it has a lot of elements and focuses on vulnerable users such as pedestrians and bicyclists. Thanks.
Frank, you're up.
You have to come off mute.
Frank, can you unmute yourself?
That would help. Sorry about that. I'm principal of FXM Associates. The firm has been around for a little over 30 years. I and my colleagues have more experience than that. On the left are some example projects we've done of village and downtown market assessments and strategic plans in communities of similar size to Granby, the exception being New Bedford. And I mention New Bedford because of the spectacular success they've had in revitalizing their downtown. They give us a lot of credit for it, and I'll get into that in more detail when we respond to your questions about what our project results have been. There's a brief thumbnail biography of my experience on the right. And my colleague Diane Sitsos will be the deputy project manager. She and I have worked together over 20 years. We have two other full-time senior professionals, each with over 30 years experience. We've successfully completed over 300 project assignments in our 30-year history. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, so our approach, I understand you've read the proposal, so we'll try to go through the scope portion of it as quickly as possible. And we can return to it if I go too quickly for you and you have questions at the end. So our approach is basically to apply design thinking to planning. What I mean by that is it's an iterative process where we go back and we revise things as we go along, as we learn more about the existing conditions, about the community's needs, about local politics. So the first part of this, the first step is what we call shared fact finding, which is somewhat like existing conditions. The difference is that we make sure that the people who are involved in the process actually agree with the facts, and that the facts that we've identified are the important ones for them to make decisions. So that can be done through a committee meeting. It can also be done through public workshops and through focus groups. So after we figured out what the basic facts of the situation are, we develop scenarios. So what are the possibilities for this area? And we test them. Is this a good scenario? Is this not a good scenario? What's good about it? What's bad about it? We explore real places with public visioning and physical planning or design, so that people can actually visualize those alternatives and get a sense of what it is that their future of their downtown will be like. And we build in rethinking and revising and building consensus into the process. So throughout the process, we're aiming to make sure that the community supports the plan from the very beginning. And then finally, crafting an implementation plan that's realistic and targeted. So we want to make sure that the implementation plan fits the place, that the town has capacity to implement it, it has the resources lined up or available, and that you're actually going to do something with it. One of your questions was, what makes a great place? So this is from Project for Public Spaces, so it has lots of great graphics. But I think it's a good sort of theoretical framework for what makes a good place. So it's divided up into 4 quadrants. In the upper left, there's sociability. So that's all the stuff about the people. Who's there? How do they use the space? What's their experience of it? So in the middle, there's the thing, the sociability. One ring out or adjectives to describe it. Those are sort of like vision components you might see. And then on the outside ring are sort of metrics for measuring. The next quadrant over in the upper right are uses and activities. So we have things like local business ownership and land use patterns and property values and rent levels and retail sales. So for this project, that's the domain of Dodson and Flinker, and it's also the domain of FXM. So what are the fundamental economic and land use parameters that are going to drive the future of this area? Moving clockwise, we've got comfort and image. So those are things like safety, cleanliness, walkability, so forth. That's, again, the domain of Dodson and Flinker. I would call that placemaking. So what does it look and feel like to be in the area? Is it comfortable? Is it a place you want to be in? And then finally, we have access and linkages, and that's a combination of Dodson and Flinker and Beta. So we put all 4 of those things together successfully, and you got a great place. And our aim will be to do that in this project. So reviewing the scope, I want to say at the outset that this is our first pass at the scope. It's in response to your RFP, making a best guess of what it is that might fit this place. We are totally open to modifying the scope to meet your needs. We have a flexible approach to our work. We're not a firm that comes in and says, this is exactly what we said we're going to do. We're going to stick to it, whether the project needs change or not. We're open to modifying things to meet your needs. We're also not a firm that's going to say, sorry, the money's out, we're done. We're a firm that's going to stick with you until the project achieves what it needs to achieve. So first step, task one, project startup, it's to hold a kickoff meeting with town staff, work through the scope, confirm it, work through the schedule. All the firms will review the applicable plans, will review the great previous engagement you all have done, and figure out what the lessons learned are from them, and hope to work with you on drawing that out. We'll create base maps of the study area, and that's the beginning of the project. From there, we will have the first committee meeting, so that will be a meeting with you all, and whoever else is appropriate to invite. So we've scoped this project as if we're predominantly working with a committee. We often work with a committee plus additional people. And we do that so that we're sure that the process is fully representing the community at every meeting. So we can talk about that if you choose to move forward with us, whether it makes sense for this project or not. So the first committee meeting, walking tour, talk about previous planning work, talk about your goals, your values, and your understanding of the town center. We'll then have focus groups or stakeholder interviews with people who you identify as being the most important to talk to about the town center. So that could be property owners, it could be business owners, it could be middle and high school students, it could be people who visit the senior center, it could be general residents of Granby. You'll tell us who you think are important to talk to. We will document the existing conditions in the town center. So when we're doing that, we're trying to understand what's there and what it means. So what are the patterns of land use? What are the materials of sidewalks and the furnishings and the lighting? What are the patterns of ownership of properties? So forth. We'll also look at your existing zoning and try and basically draw some diagrams that show what the current zoning is asking for. So if you take a parcel and you apply the zoning to it and do some speculative development, what are the results that you get? Looks like you all have put some effort into your zoning, so presumably it's working okay. We often find that when we do this exercise, the results are not actually what people are hoping for from their zoning. So there's an example there from New Canaan, Connecticut, showing an existing idealized parcel, and then what happens if you run through the zoning and attempt to add new development to that site. We'll prepare an assessment of opportunity parcels. So here we're trying to figure out what are the areas that are likely to change through redevelopment or development, and analyze the dimensional characteristics of properties, their current uses, property values, what we hear from property owners and business owners about what's more likely to change. And so we're doing that to identify really what are the sites that are most important to study from the perspective of development change. Another part of this is Beta's work on this task 1 and 2. Jeff, you want to talk to this?
Yeah, thanks, Don. So part of existing conditions is knowing what we have, because before we figure out what we want to do, we have a good inventory of what we have. So Dylan talked about this, getting available plans and studies, which we'll do. We'll also obtain any traffic and pedestrian bike volumes, parking information, crash data. So we already looked at the Yukon crash repository. The image on the left shows a heat map where the highest concentration of crashes are in the study area. Probably no surprise to you, right at the main intersections, right in the study area. So we'll dive down a little bit in the details of what are causing those. Infrastructure, inventory, including utilities. We'll identify gaps and opportunities and constraints and summarize that. And Dylan mentioned doing a walking tour. We like doing this right at the beginning of the project because we can learn a lot from you. We do it, members of your group and stakeholders in the town, and we also learn a lot about, opportunities, what are issues, on the ground and constraints. So that's something we like doing. right at the outset of the project.
Frank, you want to talk to your work on existing conditions? Remember to unmute yourself.
Yes. Our objectives in a study of this kind are to assess retail and residential market conditions and trends, to identify market-driven opportunities and constraints, and then to refine those potentials based on the plan initiatives, and will they change what the market would otherwise provide. These data, by the way, these analyses, which include detailed demographic and business profiles, a retail opportunity gap analysis, and a rental and condo housing demand analysis by age and affordable rent, and if necessary, conceptual pro forma analyses are designed to inform existing property owners and prospective investors of what real market opportunities might be to stimulate them to invest, expand what they have. We do a lot of market financial feasibility studies for private developers, so the context in which we'll present this information will be useful in the private sector. So on the right is an example of a graph of retail occupancy trends in a community we've recently worked. The surrounding submarket as well. We want to compare Granby to the submarket to see how well you're doing and what other opportunities there might be in that context, and then we'll project forward what that potential demand would be. Next slide. On the left is an example of a retail opportunity gap analysis. Basically what this is, retail sales are typically made within the closest possible distance of consumer demand. That is to say, if you can buy something within a mile, you won't travel 10 miles to get it. And the gaps, which is the difference between the existing sales and consumer demand, we measure at 5, 10, 15-minute drive times, which are the ones typically used by retailers to determine whether or not there's a potential for capturing some of the leakage, the sales that could otherwise be realized in Granby, and make a judgment about how much of that we think could be captured. To the right of that is a slide of average annual demand by selected monthly rent and age group for rental housing. As you can see, it's highest in the younger age brackets because people under 35 have a greater propensity to move and a greater propensity to rent. Again, these data are the kinds of things we prepare for private investors all the time. They will inform other team members of the scale of potential development and redevelopment that could occur for retail uses and residential uses. And there'll be useful information for you in recruiting and existing property owners in making decisions of whether or not to invest and expand in a new activity.
Thanks.
That's it. Thank you.
All right, so then we have a couple of meetings with the committee to basically review that existing commission's information and also to work through sort of how to summarize that into issues and opportunities. And at the end of task 2, we have an existing conditions report. And then we get into the fun part, at least for us it's the fun part, which is to work on the town center vision plan. So this is a physical plan for the town center covering transportation, open space, potential development, placemaking improvements. So those are park improvements, but it's also small improvements in properties that are possible to make places better. So typically what we do here is a multi-day charrette. Day 1, we often have a walking workshop. You all have already done walking tours. We can talk about whether this is useful to do again or not. For us, it's really useful to hear from people in the field in real time about what's working for them and what's not working for them. People are often more open, more communicative in this setting, and it's also more memorable for them. So we find we get to the end of the project and people are still referring back to a walk-in workshop. Also on day one, we typically do a listening workshop where we unroll maps, we talk about strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities. We present the information that we've gathered about existing issues and opportunities, ask people whether it makes sense to them, whether it's right, what they know. And we're trying to get towards their vision of the place. Again, you have all done some of this already. And so we can talk about whether this is the right fit or whether we should do something slightly different. The goal here for this is we're coming in new to the town, right? So one of the purposes is people have a need to tell us what they want to tell us, whether it's exactly what we need to know or not. And this provides an opportunity for them to tell us what's at the top of their minds. And that enables us to know, what's important to them, but it also enables them to focus better on the next day of the charrette when we're talking about visioning. They've had their say, and they can focus on the future. So day two in the visioning workshop, it's a lot of interactive activities. We typically do three-dimensional modeling with small styrofoam pieces, so people are able to do urban design in a hands-on way that really enables them to engage with design questions. And we have other activities related to streets and open space and so forth. From that, we summarize the results of the design charrette and we start drawing those scenarios I talked about earlier. So start drawing the visual vision plan. So on the left, there is an existing conditions drawing from Danvers in Massachusetts, and then the proposed is on the right. So you see where brown are new or renovated buildings, and there also is a new park. I don't know if this is a pointer. No. There's a new sort of expanded street space in the middle there on the right-hand side of the road, replacing existing parking area. So we drop the vision. We're proposing to meet with stakeholders at this point. So we want to make sure that the property owners, the business owners, the residents in the area have an opportunity to get in depth with this vision before we get too far down the road with it. So we'd like to have some stakeholder meetings to talk about it. We'll revise the vision based on their feedback and your feedback, and have another meeting about the vision and recommendations. Step 4 is developing recommendations and the implementation strategy. So we will start to work on recommendations with you all. And then our proposal is to basically give you the materials for a meeting. It seems like you all are pretty good at doing community engagement. So at this point, I think it makes sense for you all to go out into the community and start having meetings with people about the recommendations and talking them through with people, figuring out whether they're the right recommendations or not. We'll come back together and revise those recommendations, finalize the vision and recommendations, have a public forum to sort of vet it in a formal public forum setting, and then come back to the committee and finalize the vision and recommendations. So Beta's role in this is to, evaluate the traffic operations, the vehicle circulation, make recommendations for bike and ped connections, etc. Step 5, we take all of that, wrap it up in a final report. You all asked for a preliminary outline. I have copies of that here. Pass those around. Fairly standard planning report. So starting with an executive summary, an introduction about why we're doing the plan, the planning context and project objectives, talking through the existing conditions, summarizing the community engagement process, and then a section on the town center vision plan, which will have alternative scenarios we developed, the preferred scenario, diagrams and renderings of key improvements, and then design principles, which are our guidance for implementation across whether that's zoning or whether it's open space improvements or design principles for transportation improvements. And then the recommendations and implementation strategy, which at this point, I don't know how that's organized. Sometimes it's organized by topic, sometimes it's organized by, what are the big ideas for improving this area? So some form of implementation strategy, which will have the normal things of responsible parties and timeline and funding. And then a summary of recommendations in the conclusion and references. So that summary of recommendations and implementation strategy, sometimes we do that as a poster, and we find that that's really useful because there's the idea of the plan, the proverbially sitting on the shelf or literally sitting on the shelf. But we find if we give a community a poster, which has the main ideas coming out of the plan, it gets hung on the wall, and then it actually gets seen and used. Last task is just project management and additional community engagement. So outreach materials for the public, workshops, content for your town website, and social media posts. So that's the scope. Now we want to talk a little bit about Granby. So you'll have done a great job on community engagement so far. So we looked at that, and we've done some preliminary looking at Granby and talking about it as a team, and see a few things that are consistent between what we see and what was in the community engagement. So this was from your notes. I assume this is something that somebody drew up in the public workshop, and they say having a clear, if creative, way to walk from one end of the center to the other. Trees, benches, lighting. Right now it feels unsafe and confusing to walk through the center. It feels designed for cars versus people. I think that we came to the same conclusion, and Nate's going to talk a little bit about, our preliminary back of the napkin sketch of how to address that, what you might consider addressing that.
Yeah, I think, and to that end, whether it's a connection for walkers or people on bikes or a multi-use path, one of the things that we would like to do and think a real opportunity here is to look at opportunities to use to connect together existing trails and paths and sidewalk networks, as well as making some decisions with you all about whether connecting together some of the really great anchor places within the town center, like the library, the senior center, the shopping opportunities surrounding residential communities, is something that we want to do, just on public land with sidewalks and parks and things like that, or whether it's something that you might want to combine with some work on private land. And in particular, the engagement process is really well suited for trying to look for opportunities to work with people to help them that own property downtown to convey how, building a connection for pedestrians or bike and pedestrian connection on their property can benefit them, help connect people to their business, and also the community. And together with a vision that has the potential to incrementally link together some of those important spaces, both, within the town center, and then, stepping back a little bit, we like to always, look at the context a bit, recognizing that there's the school to the north of the town center, and kids may presumably now try to get downtown to do various things that kids like to do, and probably have a really hard time doing that, if you're crossing streets and looking for opportunities to see if we could find a route to connect from the school through the town center to the library and senior center, and then out towards the east, recognizing that there are, looks like there's some both town-owned land and privately owned open spaces to the east of the town center. Maybe there's an opportunity there to in the future, build connections that expand the town center, and maybe even connect to the rail trail, for example. And Glenn, who's a biker, and I think he lives nearby, was telling us about how the bike path, the rail trail to the east kind of dips into Granby to the south there. It's the dark green line on the right. And that the really only real safe way to get into town is, on some of the side roads. I think it's Canal Road and North Road in blue there. Seemed like on a bike route app seemed to corroborate Glenn's story. That's the best way to get into town. So maybe there's an opportunity to try to pull folks from the bike path through the town center, or connect to the town center, which is great both in terms of connecting people to your businesses and building community that's outside of the immediate boundaries of the town center, and also an opportunity for grant funding. Our understanding is that improvements to the rail trail were grant funded through the state this year. So building those bigger connections are important for demonstrating that your local pedestrian improvements are part of a broader network that benefits more than just a few people.
Yeah, and so I think one thing this illustrates is we want to make sure that we're talking about both things the town can do and things that private property owners can do. And that all of those are working together toward a shared vision, right? So when we talk about connections across private property, we're not saying the town is going to come in through eminent domain and turn parking lots into streets. We're talking about trying to figure out ways to encourage property owners to work together for everybody's benefit. Another example of that is also from your public engagement. People talked about parking, it seems, a fair amount, and a need for sort of the sense that parking dominates the space, and that if parking was more efficient, people would like to park once and be able to walk around to multiple destinations. So this is a map showing in gray or white there all the parking areas in the town center. And so it's covering a lot of land. We counted up quickly just the parking areas that are in the town center area, the red outline there, on commercial uses. And it was about 1,113 parking spaces for about 184,000 square feet of space. So that's a parking ratio of about 6.3 spaces per 1,000. Contemporary practice generally recommends lower parking ratios than that. And what that means is that if you can get property owners to work together to share parking, to make it easy to cross from one property to another, you free up a lot of space for better uses, for uses that are more complementary to other kinds of things that people might want in the town center. So that can be open space. It can also be additional space for development if property owners want to do that. So by basically creating zoning mechanisms for people to make better use of their land by reducing parking, space dedicated to parking, they can have a financial benefit, which can ultimately be better for everybody. This is an example from Stowe, Massachusetts, a project that we've been working on over the past few years. So this is the Stowmore Village. Similar in some ways to Granby, there's a town common down the bottom. It's off of a major state road. It's Route 62 in Massachusetts. And then there's a commercial plaza anchored by a supermarket, and then some other spaces that have been having trouble maintaining tenants. This area is being sewered, and so there are new opportunities for development here because there can be more development in their sewer. So that's the existing conditions. And so the main idea here is to basically turn the main access to the shopping center into a new street. So sort of phase one, build a few houses, a few buildings along that new main street. Sort of like pad sites, except they line one side of an aisle, and so they become something that has a sense of place instead of pad sites along a fast-moving street. Phase two, maybe you line the other side of the street. And then phase three, fill in along the main road when there's more of a sense of a place and more of a reason for people to come down there, and it knits it all together. And at the same time, sort of activates that town center, right? Now there are reasons to be visiting the edge of the town center and to be interacting with them. So We've been working on, did you hit play? We worked on planning for this. They adopted zoning changes, and now we're going back and we're doing design standards for it. And as part of that, we've been building out the vision in 3 dimensions and 3D modeling. Doesn't play, again, not a huge deal.
Well, I'm so mad because we watched it together before.
We did, we tested it, it worked.
Yeah, I don't know.
All right,
Maybe return to it?
sure.
Yeah.
And then, you all asked about lighting, and so lighting is one of the topics we're working on there, and sort of some of the principles are basically in places that are focused for pedestrians. You want to have, even lighting that's at a pedestrian scale, so lower light standards, a minimum of glare, a minimum of light being cast up into the night sky so that you're not affecting birds and also making your neighbors mad. And then another really key thing is getting the color temperature right. So with newer LED fixtures, often they can be very bright white, which doesn't really have the homely sense, the sort of firelight that humans have been used to for a long, long time. So on the left showing the sort of what it looks like with bright white light, and on the right showing what it looks like with a warmer color temperature. And then last, I just wanted to walk you through one example. This is Upton Town Center, a project that we think has some similarities to this, and we wanted to talk about implementation, where we've had success with that. So Upton Town Center, it's a small town center, less commercial activity than Granby's, but has, like Granby, has some of the key municipal functions. It has the town hall, it had a library in it, civic organizations like the VFW. So we went through a similar process of the participation with a design charrette. In this case, we used what we call a working group, which is that sort of expanded committee that I was talking about, and we invite stakeholders from all different walks of life to participate in the project throughout its term. As we proposed for Granby, we documented the community input and clarified issues and opportunities, maps and diagrams. We developed and we tested scenarios for the town center, starting with the workshop and then drawing them out. In this case, we developed a 3-dimensional model of the area. So those little styrofoam bits are sort of more refined versions of what we use in the workshop. But we can take the actual results from the workshop and then turn them into a 3-dimensional model that shows people in a cute little way what the area could look like in the future. This is an example of one of those posters I was talking about. So Upton, we did this plan in 2019. Upton came back to us just recently and wanted to hire us to do another plan for a different village center in Upton. They've been through like 3 different planners since 2019. And so the new planner was telling me that, it's been there about a year, was telling me that he looks at the poster like once a week, and it's his guiding principle for how to implement the town center vision. So it has, call outs for all the things they might want to do there. Slowing traffic, and new buildings, and new life for historic buildings, a better library, a new community center, et cetera. So since the plan was completed, they have adopted zoning changes. They did a structural evaluation for a church that the town had purchased. They put it out for RFP twice. Unfortunately, they haven't attracted a developer to it. They did a feasibility study for a new library and senior center. So one of the major recommendations of that project was they've been talking about a library for 20 years. And one of the major recommendations was combine the library with the senior center and call it a community center. Because what we were hearing was people really wanted a place where they could see other people, get together, have intergenerational mixing. So the recommendation was to combine the library with the community center and to site it in the town center. They've been looking at properties, big parcels, but far from anything. And locating in the town center would create activity there and support the businesses here. They also have moved forward with intersection and sidewalk improvements. So those are on the tip for 2026, are going to get built by Mass Department of Transportation. And then Nate's going to tell you a little bit about the community center.
And, as Dylan mentioned, that vision that was represented in the poster was really key to moving some of these individual projects forward. And it represented some particular ideas that were really critical for us. We were landscape architects as part of a team to design a combined library and senior center, and by the end of the project, playground in Upton. And those ideas really were critical for making this come to be. And some of those examples include shared parking, which was, getting at that idea that we were talking about earlier of making sure you're making the best use of parking that's available and not leaving underutilized parking. So it's had a shared parking agreement with the VFW. And with the playground, there was a previous playground on site that we rebooted and relocated slightly to all share that parking among those different uses. And then if you go to the next slide. Also, one of your questions was about play. And as landscape architects and planners, we design playgrounds, outdoor classrooms, and sort of playful learning environments, which is really important for helping kids to learn, but also to develop socially. And then if you extend beyond kids, we feel pretty strongly that play spaces and other recreational spaces are places where community comes together, and they're a really important space for having different people of different ages and abilities, walks of life, to be able to cross paths in an environment that's non-threatening and really is critical to building community. And I think Upton has been successful that way. The playground includes some of the playground equipment that was on site that people were familiar with, along with some newer spaces, such as the embankment slides, which are a good example of universal design, which we tend to try to aspire for in all of our work. That being making sure that there isn't a separate slide for folks in a wheelchair and then a slide for everybody else, but that we design spaces with features like the embankment slide that everybody can use regardless of whether you're in a wheelchair or not, equally, and it's an equal enjoyment and fun. And it's a really engaging space. And that informs our other work, when we think about parks or we think about multi-use paths and other spaces. Those are all these shared recreational places that help to connect people across ages. And then, of course, this is a senior center, a library, and a playground. And that was really critical to the overall success of this because it brought together some groups in town that otherwise tended to not get along that well on setting priorities. But it turns out that folks using the senior center didn't just want to hang out with seniors. They wanted to have a space to build, go there with their extended family, have places to hang out with their kids, or to just be enlivened by, being in the same place as people enjoying a book or enjoying the playground. And vice versa, the families benefit when all these people in the community have a place together. So that is very much at the root of what we do in our landscape architecture work and planning work, and it's kind of a basis for any of the way we think about planning. So, and other people seem to like it too. I noticed the other day on the internet that someone who goes around rating playgrounds said that it was her and her kids' favorite place to play, which I appreciated. So.
Another example of implementation. So this is from Florence, Massachusetts. Our office is actually in this image. We work in Florence, Massachusetts, which is a village center in Northampton, so we're about an hour away. We really relish the idea of working on this project because it's only an hour away. We often work 2 or 3 hours away, or 4 or 5 hours away. It's going to be on Nantucket next week, just a much longer commute. So this is existing conditions in Florence. This is showing filling in just the streets and connecting the parking on the far side of the main drag there, so that all the parking is shared and more efficient, which you can see opens up these big sites for development. And then sort of, real long-term vision of what development could look like to build out this into a more robust village center. With the new park, with buildings lighting the street, mixed-use buildings. So, it's a lofty vision, right? We implemented that through zoning changes. This is a form-based code that was adopted for both downtown Northampton and also Florence Center, customized for the two different areas. And implementation. Sometimes implementation is really pragmatic and small, right? Sometimes it's not redo everything all at once. So what we heard in public engagement in Florence was people wanted sidewalks that weren't cracked. They wanted a bus shelter with trash cans next to it because there were always Dunkin' Donut cups and Cumberland Farm cups next to the bus station, the bus stop. And they also wanted trees that would actually survive, and tree pits that were not problems for accessibility. So all of those things were implemented by the city pretty quickly. It took them, a year to get it done. And then new development has started several years after the zoning was adopted. So this is showing a parcel on the edge of the village center. It had a historic structure that was previously not in the zone, and we expanded the zone to encompass it because it was a historic structure that was sitting vacant and falling apart. And it seemed like it was a redevelopment opportunity. So the historic structure has been preserved, and there are new townhouses going in behind it. From the street, you don't see the new townhouses, although they're actually pretty nicely designed, really fitting into the character of the village center. And then there's another mixed-use building that's proposed closer to the center of Florence. It has 2,000 square feet of commercial space and 10 residential units. A quote from the permitting process from the Florence Civic and Business Association, which is, the group that hangs up the holiday lights, that puts on the concerts in the summer. A lot of business owners really invested in the downtown. So this project represents a major investment in capital in Florence. An investment I believe will enhance the downtown area in a variety of ways, all of which is aligned with the city's long-term goals and vision. It addresses crucial housing needs, but also is designed to be pedestrian-friendly, contributing positively to the local environment, right? So when people show up to the permitting process and they're supporting the project and they're referring back to things that are in the vision, I count that as a success. Last example from Amesbury, this is a project we worked on with Beta. So this was a study of another area. And the results from that were, again, adoption of zoning changes, which have resulted in a proposal for a really interesting sort of mixed residential development. It's got a traditional, sort of neo-traditional design with interconnected streets and parks and a variety of different housing types, all of which were recommendations of the plan. And they also won support finally from the state of Massachusetts for pedestrian improvements on the road that we heard about repeatedly through the process. So that's the end of our presentation. I imagine you guys have some questions for us.
Yeah, I think what we're going to do is like what we did last time. So we're just going to go around the table. I'd invite each member of the committee or otherwise to can ask a question that was particularly important to you that was on here. Can ask a new question. What's on your mind, Eric? You go first.
I'll start. We'll
Yep.
come back around. You mentioned zoning a bunch. I have keen interest in zoning. I'm on the zoning commission. You mentioned form-based code. You used a few different words there. Will your presentation have ready-to-adopt zoning included in it, or just simple recommendations?
So our approach to that is that adoption of zoning requires a robust process. We want to really work through it and make sure it's right. do all the community engagement that's required to make sure that it's adoptable. We don't see that as being within the scope of this project. For us, this project is about getting the vision down, getting the implementation plan. What I will say is that by developing a physical plan and concrete recommendations, basically we'll have all of the parameters for the zoning, so very detailed zoning recommendations. And a plan that the zoning will be based upon. So we often are called in to write zoning, and we realize that there is no plan. There's no shared vision for the area. And so writing zoning in that context it's very difficult because nobody actually knows what it is that they want. So our process is designed to set you up to have zoning that will write itself pretty easily, and ideally will be supported by the community. So very detailed zoning recommendations.
And then I'll do one more and then I'll seat it. It shouldn't be lost on you, you've done your homework, that the majority of the town in our center is privately owned. How is your proposal or plan, just in theory, going to entice private individuals to do something?
So, number one, we hope to produce a vision that's compelling enough that people are like, yeah, I want to do this, right? And part of that's the grounding and Frank's work. So what Frank really offers us is, what are the niches that need to be filled? What's the market asking for? What's the square footage of development that's possible, right? So the idea is to entice people to want to make a change. And the challenge is getting that first person to make the change. Once they're successful, other people will follow. Going back to zoning, the key part of that is making sure there are no barriers that are getting in the way of people doing the kind of development, or putting in the kinds of businesses, or building the kinds of housing or mixed use that you want in your town center area. So basically eliminating barriers. And then the other recommendations, the things that can be done on town-owned property, also support the private redevelopment. So trying to achieve a synergy between the public improvements, creating nice public spaces that draw people in so that they then go and visit a potential business across the street, making sure that people can walk safely from one area to another, and so forth.
I'll just add a bit to what Dylan said. The reason I included downtown New Bedford, even though it's quite a different scale than Granby, of course, the principles are the same. We've had the opportunity to do 4 downtown revitalization studies, as well as a dozen or so individual project market financial feasibility studies in New Bedford over the last 20 years. When we started, the ground floor vacancy rate was 39%. It's now less than 5%. There had been no investment in new or rehabilitated space in over 30 years. There's been over 300,000 square feet of rehab and new commercial and residential uses. And really what it is a testament to the public sector facilitating permitting and development opportunities for private property owners, encouraging them. They say we were instrumental because we provided the data that could convince property owners that they would have a return on an investment. I think it's much more in their ability to follow through on implementation. And so, again, going back to what Dylan was saying, they had to make sure that wasn't an obstacle to realizing market-driven development opportunities. So it's really a process that engage the private sector and encourage them that they will get a return on their investment.
Eric, we'll come back to you if you have other questions. Meg?
So which of your team would be directly working with us? Coming to the monthly meetings or
Yeah.
whatever we decide?
So Peter and I will directly work with you.
Okay.
We'll come to all the meetings. And then I would imagine that Beta and FXM will attend some meetings, and ideally virtually, to minimize their travel costs. We'd rather have the budget go toward them producing things for you than travel. And Glenn Chalder will attend the workshop and meetings in the later half of the project.
Yeah, the other question. So you had a chance to look through the workshop materials, and I think that is an interesting place to look at like how we can go more in depth with each one. And I noticed that you used the loose parts, which I really liked, and people got to build. And then in your design thinking slide, was that sort of the prototype phase that you were thinking? Or is there, I think it might not have been in your proposal, but someone else's, I don't know, you can correct me, but where they actually created something in town of minimal cost, and then they looked at circulation patterns and usage and things like that. So I just wanted to clarify when you say the prototype phase of design thinking, what you're referring to.
Yeah, that's not something we've included in our scope. I have done that in other communities.
Yeah.
That's super effective. So I was involved in a complete streets demonstration where we basically converted a 4-lane road into a 2-lane road with a separated bike lane with some pedestrian bump outs. I did a town center project where we took a little leftover space between two buildings and set up a little tea garden in it. And that one was tied into the town's first town picnic. We had other demonstrations as well in that one. But it was really great that it was tied into the picnic because like half the town showed up for their first town picnic to eat hamburgers and hot dogs and see their neighbors, and at the same time were exposed to some planning ideas and got to weigh in. So it's not something we've included, but love to do them, and if it's something you all are interested in, we can.
It is something we've done on the transportation side, using like a tactical urbanism, more in the larger communities, Hartford, Bridgeport, where we go in and the community has expressed different problems, different concerns. So we've actually implemented physical devices there that are, movable, not fixed objects, where communities can offer us feedback after they've been in place for quite a few years. We've done it in Hartford. I believe we've done it in Stamford. We've done it in some other communities too.
Love that, because our workshops, people are very interested in the hands-on approach, and then they would ask smart questions like, well, this precedent says activate alleyways, what does that mean? So I'm picturing your loose parts and getting to actually manipulate it and then showing. Because I think there is a lot of resistance to change, which I've only lived here 3 years, but it's a vibe I get. And so I think the more people in your original proposal, you said projects fail because of lack of public understanding and support. I think that's a challenge here. And people might say, no, we want that historically preserved, but then it ends up falling apart because we're only allowed to use it for housing. So sometimes the rigidity gets in the way of smart growth. So, and that's not so much as a question, but a throwing it out there for your knowledge of something. It's just my opinion that I've noticed.
I think, it may have been obvious, but just reiterating, towards the beginning, Dylan mentioned that we really pride ourselves on flexibility. I think it's really been kind of deeply ingrained in the firm's history to take public process really seriously and to work with communities to develop processes that work for a specific site and a specific community. And like the styrofoam model exercise was mostly developed in Farmington for a specific project. And then we've done, different riffs on it, and it's evolved, and we've tried different things in each place where we've used that exercise. And, over time it builds up. So we have some things that we know have worked well in the past, but we're definitely always enthusiastic about making the next best version of the public workshop. So that's what we love to do.
Yeah, and I don't think that people in Granby are unique in being resistant to change. I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, and I see it in them. It's an innate characteristic of humans that change is scary, right? So throughout our process, we try to figure out what it is that's the underlying the thing underlying that's making it scary, right? Or making people resistant to something. So they say they hate it, but why do they hate it? And can we tease it apart enough so that we can actually solve the problem they actually have and enable progress?
Thank you.
Kathy, you always decline, but do you have any questions?
No, I do not have any questions.
Okay.
Marty?
My question or comment is on, kind of the zoning front. So you talked about setting the stage for zoning, for to be able to enact some change. What about the ripple effect outside of the area or the scope that we're talking about? So if you're talking about zoning changes, right? Right. Do you also look at and try to make some recommendations that may go out a little bit further in time, where in the future we could be connecting some other areas, specifically running south, we have historical areas.
Yep.
So is it more all encompassing when you look at zoning, or for the scope of a project like this, you just kind of hone in on what's being asked?
Yeah. Well, so this yellow is the study area that was included in the RFP. So the red is the town center from our understanding, and the yellow is the study area. So I imagine we'd be looking at zoning for everything within the yellow. And then within any zoning, the adjacency, really village design, any place design, those adjacencies are really important, right? So it's important for abutting property owners. It's also important for people arriving in a place. What does that transition feel like from outside the center to inside the center? So yeah, we would be looking at it broadly. And then when you're looking at zoning, it's not just the particular district, but you also have to look at everything else that's in the zoning that may cross the entire town. That will have impacts on the area.
As landscape architects, a lot of the folks in the firm are or aspire to be. Thinking about different scales and thinking about context is pretty much at the very center of what makes a landscape architect a landscape architect. And as such, the vision, we can't help ourselves usually from solving adjacent problems, and we usually have to restrain ourselves actually from giving you a vision for everything. So, we certainly will focus on the study area and solve the problems of this project, but we don't put blinders on our vision for your town.
Great. Thank you.
That's it? Abby?
No questions.
What?
Oh, man, we wore you out with the presentation, huh?
Very thorough. Thank you.
I was looking at the clock. My goal was, half an hour. And I was stuck on 8.
You didn't.
No, I went over through it. I
I
kept being like,
actually wrote that down, Dylan.
sorry about that.
Well, wait, I have.
Mark,
Oh, good.
many questions.
Because I plan on being here till 10, at least. Maybe
Well,
11.
You're gonna be alone.
So again, I apologize if I did in no particular order. I have a series of questions. Are you guys okay with me getting them out?
Yeah.
And we'll go back again. Most of these I wrote down just as you guys are making the presentation. So I think Frank talked a little bit about the retail gap analysis. Let me just ask you frankly and directly. Does that have any real value in today's world where everything is internet-based anyway? Like, are we going to get any useful information on a retail study for Granby?
Mhm. Frank, did you hear that question?
Yeah, no, I think 10 years ago, prognosticators were saying because of online purchases, there'd be no more brick and mortar retail. Nothing could be further from the truth. There's still opportunities, there's still development, and in the right situation, in the right location, in the right market, there are real opportunities. And the data of retail gap analysis that we do is exactly the analysis that a shopping center or chain store developer, retail developer does. So this is information that you'll be putting out there that they would otherwise have to develop and pay for themselves. Is anyone going to act on it? Well, that's a more complicated question, but it's a sound analysis and it represents real potential for development. It just says that if you capture some of the sales that are leaking to other areas now, you could have some development. I don't know what that number is, obviously. You could have some development in Granby. But your question might also be rooted from Granby's perspective in the fact that you guys haven't grown in 20 years. And I wonder how much that is a concern to you as a community, that you're pretty stable in both population and households. And there may not be within the immediate confines of Granby an increasing demand for anything based on that. But a retail gap analysis just says that there's opportunities that are out there now that could be recovered in Granby because of leakage. So I guess I have a question for you: is how concerned are you that the community is stable and actually slightly declining according to the numbers I've looked at?
I'll give you my perspective, and I'll invite anybody else to join in or provide. We talked about this in our last meeting. I think if you asked our residents as a whole, do you think we need growth in Granby? They'd say, no. We don't want a single thing more in Granby, except to the extent that it's necessary to help manage their taxes.
Right.
Because we love what we have in Granby. We have this significant, probably a uniquely significant percentage of our town is permanently preserved open space. We have, we support agriculture and protect them oftentimes by preserving their uses and so forth. Everybody loves that. Everybody loves the relatively rural, not relatively, the very rural, low density outside the center. But they want to know why they have to keep paying more every year for that. So my own personal answer is what I'm hoping we get out of here is a plan that can help us utilize the resources that are already existing in the center. This is where we have sewer, water, utilities, to get the best of those, both of those worlds. We get to keep Granby the way it is, but we get to grow it in a way. And so that's a very intuitive question, Frank, because if you're relying on a retail gap that assumes we're going to have residential growth in Granby, we probably aren't in a significant way, I would suspect.
Yeah, the retail gap isn't based on growth. It's based on existing conditions. And if you look at retail opportunities, you have to really look at the surrounding communities and whether there's any growth there as you project out in the future. There are ways to increase your tax base, excuse me, marginally, without very much change to your existing character. For example, in a higher density of development in your village center, which could include some retail as well as rental. When I say high density rental housing, I'm talking 2 or 3 stories, not towers. And if it's targeted to young professionals, people under 35, let's say, and empty nesters, people already in your community, and the young professionals could be graduates of, or recent graduates of high school and college graduates who want to return to town. They're going to have very few school-age children, which would add to the burden of education costs. They're very fiscally positive types of development that you could have that wouldn't dramatically change, wouldn't noticeably changed the character of Granby as it is today. And it's a very, very difficult balance always for communities of your type. You're obviously fairly affluent, and I think that we have to be very careful as we go forward, just as you do, that the kinds of things that we talk about are reasonably scaled to the wishes of the community.
So the flip side of those analyses is every community I work in tells me, we don't want to be Boston. We don't want to be Manhattan, right? Very small community. And the reality is they are never going to be Boston. They're never going to be Manhattan. And Frank's analysis gives you some numbers to those. You know, there's X square feet of demand for additional development. The number's usually not huge. It's not Boston. It's something that.
But what you're going to hear here is we don't want to be Simsbury.
Okay, so
That's.
West Hartford more.
Well, that's
Yeah.
All right. So I think I can boil the rest of my questions down to one rambling question, which is, can you look us in the eye and say within this is a true all-in number, and that there really is flexibility to move stuff around? And just by way of a couple of examples, like you spent some time talking about the charrettes, and I was just personally wondering how valuable those are, especially early in the process where you have identified them, given the outreach we've already done, and maybe fewer, less charrettes and more towards the end where we are vetting a plan rather than trying to develop one. So those are all things within this number you've given us that we have flexibility to move around.
Yep. Yeah, we're not a firm that does change orders. You can call our references and ask them, like, did we try to hit them for more money? Did we finish the projects? So yeah, we typically work for municipalities. That's all we work for. Municipalities usually have a budget going in, and there isn't additional money. Many of our projects are funded by grants. You know, somebody's written a scope, gotten a grant from the state. They may not have any idea what it actually takes to do it. We do it. We get it done. And we're willing to rearrange things.
And we're essentially the same way, Mark. 95% of the work we do is on the public side with municipal and state DOTs. So we're used to working in this type of scenario.
And just how does administratively that work? So we're working through the process and you end up having to do more than you thought you had on your scope. Is it Abby you calling or is it Dylan?
He's calling us.
Well, I'm going to speak to Dylan, but, you know, with that said, being a vice president in the firm, I have certain authority to exceed budgets in certain ways, shapes, and forms, especially if it's, you know, for the benefit of the client. And I'm here to say that on a lot of the projects that we've done, we've exceeded the project, but it's more important to us to deliver a quality product to the client so that maybe next time we'll get some repeat business. And most of our clients are repeat business, so that's how we operate. Now, obviously, if the scope changes immensely or something out of our control dramatically happens, we would have a discussion and, you know, we may have a discussion with the town in terms of, you know, what's changed.
I'm going to make up one other example. What if it's the other direction? Like we changed it around and go, we don't really need so much of that transportation data. We need more of this. Again, you're calling Dylan, not me, right? These are just for fun.
Well,
our estimates, right?
It's funny you say that because we're already familiar with the town. We're working in the town. We have the town's pavement management system, the GIS layer base set up already. So we're already, you know, moving along on this to some extent. Now, obviously, there's a lot of work. There's also going to be, I think, personally, once you get involved in the plan, a fair amount of involvement from CONDOT, especially if you're talking about any type of curb cuts, any type of involvement in the state right away. We're all familiar with the project that was just done out here, the operational safety improvements. I think it finished last year. You know, illumination, sidewalks, sewer, water, all of those things we're very accustomed to work with. And, my 40 years in the business is revolved around working with those utilities, whether it's Eversource, whether it's Aquarian, whether it's MDC, whether it's, whatever the utility may be, so.
Maybe a more recent question. What you guys are contemplating is we have one engagement with you and you're separately engaging them. Right?
Yep, they're subsidized.
Right.
Okay. All right,
So we're responsible for getting the project done.
understood. Okay. Go back. It's like the Z fantasy draft I was just saying. Now we're going back down. You get another pick.
Still doesn't have the
Other questions? Marty?
No, is there a copy of the presentation available?
Yes, there's one on that computer back there, but we can also give you.
And there's a video on that USB that's pretty neat, so if you ever get a chance to watch it.
Meg?
I was just thinking about the stakeholder groups. You talked about like coming back to us with your recommendations and then we would meet with the stakeholders.
Mhm.
Is that correct? Do I have that right?
Yeah, so we have focus groups early on in the process,
Uh-huh.
and then we have,
And do you facilitate those?
yeah, we facilitate
Okay.
those. Then we have, once we have a vision roughed out, we have stakeholder meetings at that point, so that we're going to the people who are most impacted with them in private before it's public. And then later on in the process, once we feel like we have the vision and the recommendations worked out, then we would equip you guys to have meetings with all over town, as many people as you can possibly meet with, to get their input in small group settings.
So I guess my final word would be pivoting on a couple of things I heard tonight from getting in both of our.
Eric, do me a favor, speak up, because I've heard constituents say before that they have a hard time.
So pivoting off of the couple of comments from Mark about resistance, there is some resistance in the town to some change, but I'm going to share with you, this is my unfiltered view, maybe some others. The resistance comes from 1% of the town, and I think that's generous. I think it comes from even a smaller percentage. Your challenge will be to get the other 99% to come out and voice their opinion so we can have a full view. That includes, we get almost no representation from commercial landowners. So you'll have to come up with creative ways to get that public input to help have a balanced position, because you will hear from the 1% I mentioned, and it will provide a very one-sided view of what this town needs and wants.
Yeah, and so those focus groups are,
But I don't know how you advertise, internet, paper, word of mouth, flyers, free pizza, beer, something. Get people out.
Right.
Beer means word.
We did do free food, which,
And it got some people out that I think were new.
yeah,
sure,
yeah.
good thinkers.
Yeah, and then I think there's the question for you all, as a group that's advising decision makers, and for the decision makers too, which is, how do you decide how to weight voices when you're hearing from what you think may not be representative of your community? So,
I feel like the workshop was representative in that it was multi-generational and a lot of different viewpoints and lenses if you even just go through dump your bucket. But I would agree that anyone posting on like a social media website, maybe it is more that kind of 1% if we don't want change. I don't know. I'm not there enough, but
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, it's so that's a
The
problem.
commercial property is one I do think we are missing.
Yeah, just gonna say,
I can assure you that you're not unique in having little participation from the business sector. It's true everywhere. And part of the reason is they do not want to commit themselves publicly to anything that could come back to haunt them or damage their relationship with their customers. The way we approach the commercial sector is to try to engage, and you can tell us who we really need to talk to, in one-on-one confidential interviews that enables them to tell us without fear of attribution or leaking to the public at all what they really think is going on and what the public sector can do to help them or not help them. And sometimes they just say, leave us alone. We're just finishing up a project, a master plan in Groton, Mass, and has a fair number of farmers there and others in Pepperell. Basically, they said, leave us alone. You know, everything's, don't tell us what to do. We're fine. And you may hear that too, which is not a bad sign necessarily. But you're not unique in having trouble getting the business interests to express themselves. They rarely come out in public. When they want something done, they call the governor, you know. That's how the private sector works.
All right, you guys have any questions for us? What are you looking for? What do you think would make the project successful? Go ahead. Yeah, I don't always want to go first.
Good consultant, right? You've got actually a lot of questions on the question sheet. Let's see.
While he's thinking.
Well, let me think.
All right. So for me, we would end up with a document that has, first, the vision is, we had our cake and ate it too. We didn't change Granby at all, but we changed Granby. But it has two primary purposes. One is to guide the community's decisions regarding resource allocation. As affluent a community as we are, because compared to others, we have limited resources.
Right.
That's primarily for the Board of Selectmen. It's a real usable document that we can helps to guide our decisions. Maybe more importantly, it's actually a workable document that the Planning and Zoning Commission can use to actually evaluate applications. And then, you know, it's a document the Development Commission can use to help attract what we're trying to do. It's a usable document.
And one thing that we didn't talk about or just comment on, and it aligns with our plan conservation development, which is a very important document, guideline for this time. So that's something that's really have to.
Because if it doesn't, we didn't have our cake and eat it too. If this takes on a life of its own, and it doesn't support the other, making up the number, 100 pages of the planning, because the section of the plan of conservation development that deals with town center is a page and a half long. But it has to contemplate the whole thing.
I have one
I'm
question.
sure from the perspective of your economic development consultant, after 50 years of doing this work, I have no interest in producing anything that's going to sit on the shelf. It's either going to be useful or it's not going to come out of my shelf. I think that we like to see things happen, and I think you have an interesting set of possibilities in Granby that we would look forward to helping you try to advance.
Did you have a question?
It's not a necessary question. It's a curiosity. What started this process? It looks like a question that Abby should answer.
The OCD Implementation Committee.
Okay.
Yep. And I think in the last few years anyway, we've made a concerted effort to have these kind of joint meetings where the Board of Selectmen, the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Development Commission, and others are working together on things.
Yep.
And so that's kind of how we got from the implementation committee to a advisory committee. The Planning and Zoning Commission, with the input of the Development Commission, actually recommended a very specific scope for this committee, which the Board of Selectmen adopted, which will be one of your guiding documents. Yeah. So, All right, here's what we'll do. We'll recess for a few minutes so you guys can, get cleaned up and go out, then we'll go on with the rest of our agenda. We're gonna try to make a decision as quickly as we can. From here, our committee, makes a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. It'll be the Board of Selectmen who will authorize the negotiating contract with you or enter a contract with you. So we'll work around whatever the Board of Selectmen's ultimate agenda is, but this committee's gonna work hard to make a recommendation in short order. So,
Very good.
all right.
Thanks so much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you.
We'll take a 5-minute break, committee, and then we'll come back to the MC. Thank you. All right, thank
Can I
you.
relocate so I can bring it in a little? Yeah.
All right. What do y'all think? We're blessed and cursed. I think we interviewed 2 firms that are very, very qualified. I like them both. It's gonna be a tough decision. Where do you want to start? Sitting here, do you have an idea in your mind who you liked of the 2, since you were here for both?
No, not quite finding
Okay. What about you?
I think they would both be amazing. It is a really hard decision. Do you want a gut instinct?
No, I'm just trying to get a feel for if it was going to be,
I will
if
say
it was going to
that-
be easy. Everybody go, oh, yeah. So it's obviously not going to be easy.
Yeah. I think that BFJ, that's what they're called, right? I think that they maybe were more Granby specific. And I think that they put a lot of time and effort into learning about who we are on the committee, what our town is, and I think they would devote themselves to learning as much as they could from businesses and residents. And that sort of deep research really stuck with me.
That's a good point. I think part of the conversation, the difference between the 2 is there's one team. Tonight, it's one team, sub-teams that are working towards this end. So that, I think, is something that needs some thought, like, play out. The advantages could be of that, disadvantages. So that's the biggest difference between the 2. Right off the bat.
I guess the fundamental question for tonight that we should start with is, do y'all want to try to plow through it tonight, or do you want to take some time and try to, we can't wait till the end of September to meet again. Try to identify another date to get back together where we can all digest what we saw. And it makes no difference to me.
Well, I'll just simply offer that since I was absent the last time and we have somebody absent tonight, you're going to have to give John time to watch the video to participate. I have only watched a half hour of last presentation. At your request, I watched the last half hour because it was very planning and zoning focused. So I have no comment tonight.
You are advocating that we don't decide tonight and we.
Well, if you can decide, it just you won't get my vote.
Why do you have to?
You don't have
I want to say to the entire community who might someday watch this, why do you have to be such a jerk all the time, Myers?
I was trying to state the obvious.
All the time.
It's a good point, though. John needs to watch them.
That's right.
Just say yes, I prefer that we leave.
Could we?
Mr. Fiorentino, I prefer that we wait.
Thank you.
What were your 2 or 3 picks, by the way, from the beginning of the process? I don't know, did we?
You never told
No,
us.
yeah, I never told you. I never told you. Oh.
Do you want to tell us?
You see what I mean?
I'm trying to put them on.
We know who's not on there. I remember you being like, not
Yeah,
on.
that's right, and I didn't bring my pick sheet. Again.
But we confirmed that these two were on your list.
Yes, they were on the list, yes. Yeah, I only rolled one of them out.
All right. So why don't we spend, I'm sorry, you were this.
Oh, I was gonna say, do we have to wait a month or can we meet again in 2 weeks?
No, if we're not going to decide tonight, then we have to commit
Yeah.
tonight. We should spend the rest of our time finding a time where we can get together. And it needs a little advance notice because if we're going to complete the process. We want to get back on Zoom and make sure that we can record it. So Abby, what?
I'm gone for a couple of weeks.
Could you Zoom in potentially?
Do you want to Zoom?
The international, right,
When do you leave?
the 3rd of September, back on the 18th.
So tomorrow.
Monday.
Well, it's either that or you communicate to Abby after you've done it, which your preference is, right?
Do that.
But I don't think we want to wait till after the 18th. But to do that, we might as well wait till the 25th, which I don't think is. What do we,
Are you looking for the Board of Selectmen meeting on the 16th then, to try and get a recommendation?
well, yes,
Okay.
that mean, if, that's a very good point.
Would you have time to notice it though?
Because if we're not going to meet that, then we might as well just use the 25th,
Right.
because
Right.
we wouldn't,
So-
the Board of Selectmen's not going to meet again until October.
Because the 9th, 10th, and 11th, this room is booked with development, P&Z, and wetlands.
Well,
All of which,
I know, yeah.
it's maybe the
Yeah, right. Board of Selectmen meetings are the 16th of September.
They're the 3rd,
third.
the 3rd, the 16th, and the 7th.
Is there enough time for notice also if we meet on the 25th and you're meeting on the 7th? What's the time?
There's plenty of notice for that.
That-
I guess I'm fine with that. I mean, I'm going back on what I said, like, we should move quicker, but with the holiday, with you out of town, and with the goal being a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, there's no reason to rush after all the work we put into it to not be able to meet a date anyway, right? Because right?
Yeah, so, I might be jumping ahead. So if we do keep our meeting on the 25th then to make a decision, that would allow additional time to reach out to references. If that is something that the committee wants me to do, it was requested as part of the RFP that information be provided. So if there are specific questions the committee has that you want me to talk through in more detail with references to, I just want to put that out there.
That's a good idea. So my answer would be yes, we want you to reach out to references. And why don't we give everybody a few days to email you any questions or thoughts?
Okay.
Yeah. I don't need a couple days. I would like you just to ask around the change order situation, like,
Okay.
how close can we count on the original budget being accurate? So everybody okay with that? A couple days to get Abby any questions you want asked as she calls references. It should be a consistent list, so you should ask the same questions.
Mine would be how collaborative and flexible were they?
was the town municipality or whoever they did the work for, were they happy with the outcome?
Yeah, that's three good ones. Did they stay in budget? Were they flexible? Collaborative?
Did they achieve the outcome? Something to that effect, like achieve some better
Go
adjective.
ahead, Marty, try to top that.
And just one question I have, has staff really interacting with them behind the scenes about communication? And how easy or difficult was that?
Sure.
in Arranging?
Sure.
Yeah, I was even just thinking while listening to Dylan talk, I was like, I wonder if he would want to get together and like look at all the data from the workshop, but like, how doable is that? Like, so that you don't have to be at every, so it's not all committee all the time, you know? How accessible are they?
That's a very good question, especially on your that you just raised. Did, in particular, we can't have you or the committee running around to 5 different people. Like, it doesn't really work the way they're saying it works. All right. So today, let's say if Marty leaves on the 3rd, so let's say today's Wednesday. By the end of the week, if you have any additional questions for Abby related to the references, get them to her. And then will you reach out to both and tell them what we're doing? We're going to check references, and the committee is going to fully discuss it and hopefully make a recommendation on the 25th
Yep.
for a presentation to the Board of Selectmen on the 7th. Everybody good with that?
We should send a note out to that effect so John can read it and know what his timetable is as well.
Or to watch tonight.
Well, but to
Yeah.
get questions in.
Yeah.
With the proposed
Will
question.
you do that, or, yeah, right.
Mark, can you repeat the dates you gave? Like, when are we going to meet again and when do you want it to go to board?
We would meet, we're going to tell the applicant we're going to meet and try to make a decision on a recommendation on September 25th, right?
Okay,
For Board of Selectmen action on October 7th.
okay. Thank you.
Everybody good with that? All right. There is no public left in either room or on Zoom. Before we adjourn, does anybody have anything else? I appreciate the effort everybody is putting into this. It's important and long-term issue we are dealing with the firm, or with the town. So I'm grateful that you guys are willing to do the work. Everybody good?
Yeah.
All right, well then I will accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right,